He's locked in. He made this video how many days ago? 3 days ago. Bro, that's from like 4 days ago. He's in here right now. This motherfucker in here watching me watch him. That's crazy. Anyway, let's look at the alt-right dressing like the radical left.
On this video, or I'm gonna lose it. If you're watching my videos, we probably have a similar algorithm, and you've seen the clips and heard the discourse around the Sam Seder Jubilee video titled 20 Trump supporters take on one progressive. If you have no idea what I'm talking about and don't know how you got here, don't worry. I'll explain everything. Consider sticking around for a while. A lot of the discourse around that video is your typical frustration with most Jubilee content. How it's a complete spectacle where nothing is accomplished and no one learns anything.
Okay, respect. Respect. I like this guy already.
The Sam Seder video, people have mostly been clowning on Trump supporters, aka secret fascists in this case, as they go flying off the roller coaster tycoon death trap that is the Dunning-Kruger parabola. As per usual, there was also outrage at Jubilee themselves for platforming a bunch of cultists who have fully drunk the MAGA Kool-Aid and allowed them to spread harmful misinformation on their platform. There were also a few folks confused by something else that didn't have anything to do with the rhetoric or regurgitated Jordan Peterson talking points. Didn't have anything to do with their ideology or worldview. It was something that might actually be more nefarious than outright Sieg Heiling or calling immigrants rapists because of how surreptitious and deceptive it is. The fact that a lot of the conservatives didn't look like conservatives. This type of guy specifically, who looks like he unironically refers to himself as an ally, and owns and operates a bisexual vegan bakery where polycules get a discount on iced matcha that they can pay for in vintage vinyl records. Fashion is more than just buying and wearing the trendiest, most expensive designer clothes. The way we dress sometimes tells others about ourselves more than what we say does. And you can infer a lot of things about a person based on their style and fashion sense. Is it always accurate? No, absolutely not. But one of fashion's main functions is to signal to others that you may have aligning interests and even political views. Take this guy, for example. The fleece vest, the laminated name tag, the ill-fitting bootcut jeans that match his wife's probably lead you to believe he works in tech, which might lead you to assume other things about him. Probably not a fan of the gym, socially awkward, wants to save the world through technological advancements of his startup, might even be a World of Warcraft incel of some kind. Anything is possible. Now take a look at this guy, the skin-tight.
Yeah, Dominican Ray, dude. It always works, baby. It always works. 100% success rating, okay? Hit him with the motherfucking Dominican Ray. Just like Mark Zuckerberg. This photo is screaming, Yo voy a votar por Donald Trump. That's what it's screaming at me. Ay, 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 por Dios. Yo voy a votar por Donald Trump.
Dan Flash shirt wrapped around his bulging pecs, the awful white pants and matching belt, even the way he accessorizes his new wife's laminated face tell you a completely different story. This guy's definitely a meathead who could be mistaken as the founder of the XFL or Tap Out, not a multi-billion-dollar tech company that is actually destroying the planet and not saving it like the other guy dreamt of doing. He may have changed the way he looks, but you can't cure social awkwardness by buying designer clothes, unfortunately. Certain aesthetics, including clothing and hair and makeup, are more than just trends. There's historical and cultural context that we all understand to a degree, whether consciously or unconsciously. And everyone appropriates fashion all the time. It's how you get new trends and subcultures. A lot of the time it's done out of respect or as a way to reclaim a narrative or to make a subversive commentary on class division. Conservatives and even further right groups are no different, co-opting certain aesthetics and fashion styles for different means with different intent. For example, what do you assume about these guys? You might be concerned that they're racist Nazi punks since one of them looks like a skinhead, and they're both wearing military-style jackets covered in band patches and pins with the big romper-stomper boots. But you'd be wrong. They're what's known as sharps, skinheads against racial prejudice. If you look close enough, they're both wearing Sharps t-shirts, and one has a gay pride patch and the other has a patch that says, "Boots and braces don't make a racist," a reference to the style of boots and suspenders that are synonymous with Nazi skinhead punks. In this context, the broader aesthetics might confuse the average person who's unfamiliar with punk or skinhead culture.
Yeah, the laces that you wear in your Doc Martens apparently is what brands you as a Nazi punk or a anti-Nazi punk. And I only know about this because I got those Rick Owens Doc Martens that have like the gray Rick Owens laces. And apparently Nazis have white laces. So there were dumb chatters. Lace code is dead. Okay. Oh, red laces as well, apparently. But there were some dumbass chatters who were like, oh, dude, why did you buy Doc Martens with white laces? It's like, first of all, they're not white, okay? They're not. They're like the very clear Rick Owens colored fat laces. Lace code is different and regional, so just wear rainbow laces. What's the word on yellow? No, yellow laces are fine. I have Doc Martens. One of them has yellow laces because that was the only color that was available for, and it was only for one shoe that I actually tied yellow laces to because my black laces got ripped apart.
But for those in the know, this is a massive difference that signals two wildly opposing ideologies despite sharing a few stylistic elements. Just like how this guy from the Jubilee video is not the same as this guy, even though they have the same general aesthetic.
Oh my god, get Alex.
And for anyone who is unfamiliar, that second guy is Alex Peter, aka Lol Overruled on TikTok, a pretty outspoken leftist and public defender in the state of New York. The opposite of that melted stick of butter wearing a merkin as a toupee. You see, the original skinheads were always sharps, they just didn't have to call themselves that. But over the years, the punk aesthetic was co-opted by racist pieces of shit, to the point that society at large began associating the look solely with Nazi punks. Sharps emerged as a response to fascist appropriation and have tried to reclaim the movement and the aesthetic to a certain degree. As for the Jubilee Trump supporters people have been pointing out, well, they're basically doing the same thing. They've taken a look and appropriated it as a kind of soft rebrand, but more on that later. You can find this appropriation among all sorts of styles and fashion aesthetics. Someone who's rocking a linen skirt and white dreadlocks and a septum piercing could just be into New Age spiritual hogwash and crystals. Or they could be an anti-vaxxer who thinks ivermectin and the power of positive.
It's because they were the first thing, and then they became the second thing.
Medicine. Someone wearing too tight synthetic gym clothes who's built like a bicycle seat could be a professional bodybuilder, or deeply into red pill manosphere 4chan boards. Even when someone's clothing is meant for function over fashion, you can probably still make some pretty logical assumptions about them. If someone is wearing $3,000 waterproof down-filled Gore-Tex ski gear, that might indicate their class, and thus their finances, and thus the industry they work in, and thus the associated priorities they might have in life. If they're wearing the hide of a bear they tracked, killed, field dressed, tanned, and then stitched into a set of matching pants and coat, that would certainly tell you something different. That guy isn't worried about fashion, but survival, who has a set of skills and values that the mammoth annual ski pass holder simply doesn't. I mean, either way, they're probably both xenophobic lunatics who tell indigenous people to go back to wherever they came from, though. So there's that. Fashion isn't a frivolity and...
Okay, bro. The bearskin guy got hated on for no reason. That dude probably is indigenous. Or at least lies about being indigenous.
Can be very nuanced.
Actually, I take it back. Both of them lie about being indigenous. That's like the most white trait you can get. That's the white people's favorite pastime, is to lie and be like, oh, I'm, 17% Sioux.
General is just another form of communication. Language, even. The thing about communication and language is that it evolves over time, where certain words or messaging gain new or multiple meanings depending on the dominant group who's using it or has appropriate.
You dress like the right and left. You are the true centrist. No one is saying this. I know. People need to recognize.
Appropriated it. This can lead to the erasure of its origins, where the dominant users engage with the language of fashion and aesthetics to further some backwards regressive movement, and not out of respect for its founders or originators. Or like a sheep in wolf's clothing, sneak into the herd they were ostracized from because of those regressive archaic beliefs. Conservative groups from working class ignorant hicks all the way over to the Nazi youth have been appropriating the aesthetics and symbols of other cultures for hundreds of years. Those freedom-loving, gun-toting bootlickers that dress up like cowboys and sing Confederate rebel songs about owning human beings. Yeah, that entire look came from Mexican vaqueros and early Native American culture. For sake, the earliest cowboys were black, and now dip who have lost a foot to diabetes go around calling themselves cowboys because they think putting a giant American or Confederate flag on the back of their jazzy scooter is the same thing. They're not dressing up in cowboy garb because they work a farm or herd cattle or appreciate the Americana aesthetics as fashion first and foremost. They're cosplaying cartoonish patriotism where style is secondary to being an outspoken racist who has a twisted nationalist view of what America represents. And more recently, groups like the Proud Boys have adopted their uniform from punk aesthetics, thrusting the Fred Perry polo back into modern-day fascist ubiquity. Similar to the MA1 bomber and Doc Martens, the Fred Perry polo has been an on-again, off-again marker among skinhead punks for decades. The Proud Boys just picked a specific colorway and instead of shaving their heads, paired it with a $60 high and tight, more reminiscent of 2000s straight-edge Boston beatdown hardcore than 1980s punk. The most embarrassing were the Boogaloo Boys appropriating tiki torches and cheap Hawaiian shirts because nothing says I'm a badass who's gonna burn a cross on your lawn like—
Yeah, that was short-lived. Remember when people would say, I'm dressing up like a Boogaloo Boy because I never stopped wearing Hawaiian shirts? Yeah, I don't think people think about that anymore. That association is gone.
Like wearing the wardrobe of an alcoholic retiree whose kids no longer speak to him. Very powerful. But why? Why can't they come up with their own unique thing? It's because they're boring. When I think of conservative fashion, I think of a lot of things, but it's usually this. Sport coats, penny loafers, modest maxi dresses that have the very flattering shape of a sack of sorghum. But there are a myriad of other lazy, boring, unimaginative versions of conservative fashion as well. When I think of Trump-supporting conservatives in 2025, I tend to think of this, and whatever this is. As you can see, they are some of the most uncreative, unoriginal people on—
Excuse me, that's a banger.
On the planet.
You don't understand art, sweetie. It's okay.
When they're
Vaquero, say it with me. Vaquero!
not using the American flag for every pattern on their clothing, they're stealing from others because they can't come up with a unique identity on their own. Like anything, though, conservative fashion does evolve. Usually just becomes more extreme, but only up to a certain point because their fashion sense is dictated by their conservative values, patriarchal modesty, and themes of authoritarianism. A pretty narrow set of creative pillars to work within. Fascist German and Italian military uniforms were designed with these ideals in mind, specifically to make anyone in an SS uniform look like the ideal Übermensch that drew inspiration from European aristocracy. It was the ultimate power suit, a white power suit that was ironically all black. Proud Boys fashion has followed a similar trend for a modern-day Call of Duty audience, and the tradwife aesthetic of recent years has admittedly embraced a less modest version of femininity with a pastoral twist, but to a fetishistic degree that is still ultimately controlled by men. So when this softboy aesthetic of corduroy and moppet hair popped up in the Jubilee video, people had some questions. Mainly of confusion because this look has been washed for a few years, especially the undercut man bun, but never has it signified that someone was a conservative or even a fascist like the other examples. The look itself fell out of fashion because guys who had the mustache and the glasses and the flopped coif and the chunky sweater got memed and stereotyped as someone who gaslights women and refuses to have condom sex. Sure, there were problematic inferences being made shortly after its popularization, but it's not like people thought they were—
Dude, look at this. Oh, God. I wanna interrupt this broadcast for a brief moment because I was peeking at Twitter and I couldn't handle it. Joe Trusman works for Foundation for Defending Democracy. Okay. He's kind of cooking you. Wait, what? No. Look at this tweet. Mohammed Shahada says, Israel just bombed a key Gazan hospital under the pretext of targeting a wounded politician, non-combatant, while he was on a hospital bed receiving life-saving care. If Russia did this under the same pretext, the Western world would condemn this nonstop as a terror attack. Joe Trusman, Ismail Barhoum was involved in financing terrorism. He was sanctioned by nearly half a dozen countries for his role in raising funds for Hamas through charities and other means. Hamas is a terrorist organization. To which I responded, oh, thanks for this information. I now think bombing... I was so angry. I typed it so poorly. Thank you for defending democracy. I said, I now thinking... Wait, you can't edit replies? God damn it. Whatever. I now thinking... I've been there. Whatever. I know thinking. I know thinking. I know thinking. It's too late. It's already out. Oh, I thanks for this information. I know thinking. I thanks for this information. I know thinking. It makes it better. I'm still on the vaquero. That's what happened. That's a real ESL moment. Too late. I can't dirty delete. I'm keeping it. I'm still here. I'm still here. I was so angry. I was so angry when I saw that tweet on the timeline that I just angrily typed it up without even looking at the grammar and spelling mistakes.
Or straight up Nazis. And obviously, not every guy who looked like a Muppet that made a wish to be a human were all problematic. That's just what the internet was saying. Regardless, there was a cognitive dissonance based on our expectations of certain fashion choices when hearing conservative brain rot come from guys who dress in a way that aligns with more progressive or even just lived up thought.
It's actually DEIA,
Sure.
right? You know that.
Right.
In government agencies. The A being for accessibility.
Right. Yeah, and I think the attack on DEI isn't an attack on people's protections. It's on the other end of the spectrum, right? Wanting to end DEI doesn't want to end protections for someone being disabled, someone being inaccessible to get into a job.
It rather wants to de-incentivize corporations to push them to hire these people on unfair bases.
That's because this genre of guy could easily also be the emotionally intelligent, calls his mom every day kind of guy who understands that running a government is not equivalent to working at McDonald's.
What does race have to do with running an effective government? What does race have to do? If let's say DEI on the micro level.
I will tell you right now.
DEI on the micro level at McDonald's.
I'll tell you.
Am I going to get better nuggets?
I'll ask you a question.
If the cashier is black or white,
what
does that have to do with anything?
I'll tell you what it is.
This style also fell out of fashion because it was no longer unique and cool in a broad sense and started to feel extremely contrived. There are two things that require something or someone in order to be considered cool: individualism and nonchalance. Once this style, or any style really, enters mainstream culture, it no longer embodies a sense of individualism or nonchalance. Not everyone, but a large portion of men started intentionally switching up their style and dressing like this, which is inherently chalant. You cannot be unconcerned or unbothered when you're going out of your way to dress in a certain style. If you do it because it's just trending, you're a corny poser. It's why everyone dunked on Zuckerberg when he got hit with the Dominican boy Ray.
Okay, this guy's a Hasanabi head. All right, I'm sorry. He did a Lolo mention and okay, come on. What are we doing here? What are we doing here, dude?
Going from looking like a wet Martian to elder millennial suffering a midlife crisis. The awareness of hopping on a trend is the antithesis of cool. When conservatives try and
Youngest fan. Shut up.
rebrand their image, it feels forced for this very reason. It's not cool anymore, especially when they're a multi-billionaire CEO whose image is inextricably tied to the authoritarian policies of their company. This is typically because they're about a decade late to whatever fashion trend they've adopted because they don't bother themselves with childish things like fashion and art. They've got coding to do. They're simply using personal optics to make spreading misinformation across their technocratic empires more palatable. They are incapable of being nonchalant or having any individual thought, which plays right back into how boring they are. You're not fooling anyone, Zuck. You've got no aura. And that right there is another explanation why this new breed of soft boy conservative slash fascist looks like this. It's less threatening than a tailored Schutzstaffel uniform or a form-fitting Proud Boy polo and tactical vest. It's a form of subversion and manipulation meant to put others at ease, where they're less likely to react with hostility or revulsion when they start spouting fascist nonsense. Not only that, it's because the guys who aren't conservatives or alt-right weirdos who did dress like this were getting laid. I think I can confidently say most women don't want to someone wearing a Klan hood, or who's jacked up on HGH in a polo they bought in the kids section that represents Christian nationalism. I'm sure there are some women who are into that aesthetic and dress in a similar way. But even if they do, they're not putting out the same way a liberated, bra-burning leftist woman is. They're waiting until marriage and only having sex as a means to breed more offspring. This is especially true of young, lonely, white men, which I've already talked about once before. One of the reasons a lot of these incel fascists become incel fascists is because of a hatred of women and the idea that they are somehow owed sex for simply existing. When they struggle to participate in a little casual sex because they're socially awkward or lack emotional intelligence or just can't help themselves talk about their love of capital punishment among mixed company, they don't take that as a sign to work on themselves and reevaluate some of those opinions. They go down the easy route of resentment and are comforted by a worldview that tells them they should get to own women and that the trad wife is a woman's natural biological role in the family unit and that marital rape is a-okay. Basically, conservative ideology, from liberal and social conservatism all the way over to authoritarianism and fascism, is a bitchless ideology that preys on white male loneliness.
People are saying dudes who look like this should be doing theater and making iced lattes, not arguing in favor of fascism, and the explanation for this is actually quite simple, okay? Fascists don't get... These chuds think that if they, put on the wire rim glasses and do the floppy hair and the...
I think so too. I mean, this one's gay, but I think he's just like a gay grifter and not very smart. So he just like couldn't cut it in Hollywood. So he just became like right wing, which is in many such cases. But yeah, I think a lot of other dudes that do this are doing it to adopt an aesthetic because conservative values and conservatism, reactionary ideology, requires you to put no real thought into aesthetics in general, and you just kind of adopt the aesthetics of the people that previous generations conservatives would call the F slur,
the mustache or the
loneliness.
People are saying dudes who look like this should be doing theater and making iced lattes, not okay? If they put on the wire rim glasses and do the floppy hair and the mustache or the man bun, that will attract women to them because they know in their heart of hearts that women are not attracted to fascists. They're attracted to nice people. People who actually, are normal, dress a certain way. They have stable lives and partners who they love. And fascists have none of that, so they start doing this. And then this quickly becomes the aesthetic of fascism.
It's also important to note that not all right-wing men turn to conservative ideology because they can't get laid. A lot of it is, unfortunately, much more petty than that, to the point that it's almost a lazy trope. History is riddled with failed artists turned fascist. Many of the biggest names in today's conservative spaces ended up there because they were rejected from the humanities and then developed this chip on their shoulder and went even further right, almost out of spite. Ben Shapiro is a failed screenwriter, Jordan Peterson is a failed intellectual, Steven Crowder, failed stand-up comic, Dave Rubin, failed actor, Hitler, failed painter. That Vinny guy who had a meltdown on Piers Morgan is not only a failed comic, but a failed Twitch streamer making his red face
He's locked in. He made this video how many days ago? 3 days ago. Bro, that's from like 4 days ago. He's in here right now. This motherfucker in here watching me watch him and is not even saying anything. That's crazy.
tirade even funnier because it was directed at Hasan Piker, a very successful leftist streamer.
You know what? Everybody that's new gets to see my little nip real quick. Yeah.
I'm a big fan of you, so I don't want you to die. I feel like your heart pressure is going up. You're turning red, Vinny.
What a jealous little man. I wonder how tall he is, actually. There's no way he's over 6 feet. Vinny O'Shana. 5'9". This typically happens because they're egomaniacs who can't handle criticism or rejection and lacked the critical thinking skills necessary for them to understand what differentiates good and bad art, and that maybe they needed to work a little harder at acting or screenwriting, but then they didn't because they're lazy and entitled. Also, getting paid to make art is not very lucrative, and more difficult than people think. It really can't coexist with conservative ideology that favors monetary value and short-term gains over prioritizing one's passion to become great, or just as a means to catharsis and self-reflection. Those don't really coincide, but becoming a professional troll with a podcast funded by right-wing donors is very lucrative. Unfortunately, this means certain fashions and aesthetics become the de facto uniform of fascism because normal, empathetic people don't want to be associated with symbols of hate and have to constantly update our wardrobe. I mean, in some ways, we can thank fascists for constantly pushing fashion forward and involuntarily creating new aesthetics. We don't have to stop wearing Hawaiian shirts just because a group of white supremacists wore them that one time. And honestly, caving at the first instance is how they win, damn it! But it is annoying that we do have to be ever more vigilant about what styles and brands and symbols we put on our fucking bodies just because some ignorant potato-brained incel couldn't get laid. And one last thing, when Trump supporting conservatives do try their hand at fashion, you get the most gaudy, tactless, vulgar displays of phony patriotism that is an insult to pattern makers everywhere.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we held at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight, o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
That's the video. Thanks so much for sticking around. If you made it this far, that means you're special. Now, make sure you follow the rules of the channel and like, share, comment, subscribe. If you don't know that by now, you might not be a fan of the channel. Genuinely, thank you, everybody.
That was good. Dude, a lot of smaller channels that I've been watching have been putting out absolute bangers recently.